In Chapter 3 of Gabriel Garcia Marquez's masterpiece, Cien Años de Soledad, or 100 Years of Solitude, a small, unknown girl arrives on the doorstep of the Buendía household. She is thin, orphaned, as the note she carries implies, and on her back she carries a large sack, filled with her parents' bones. The family does not recognize any names on the note, although it claims she is the daughter of their second cousin. In this whirlwind of strange happenings, and without much else to do, the family adopts her as their second daughter. Shortly after, the servants discover something strange about the small girl. They have difficulty feeding her anything. In fact, at the time of her arrival, the only things she'll eat are the whitewash they use on the walls and dirt. The practice of eating earth is one that stretches back millennia, and is technically called Geophagia. While it has been recorded recently as a pathological disease, it is clear in the historical record that many cultures all over the world have records of their people eating soil or clay. The reason for this is not solid, and remains a speculative mystery for scientific anthropologists to this day. But Gabriel Garcia Marquez wasn't an anthropologist, was he? No, he was a writer. So why, in his story, does Rebecca Buendía eat earth? To understand this, we first need to take a very quick look at the technique Marquez championed: magical realism. Magical realism is a writing style first championed by Massimo Bentompelli, an Italian writer who took inspiration from German paintings. The result is a style which depicts fantastical or impossible things happening alongside normal life. This is distinct from fantasy in that these things are not recognized as impossible or unusual by the context of the story. Men will talk nonsense. Ghosts will walk and talk to people they knew in life. Unknown girls show up carrying the bones of their parents, and this is all just accepted. There is no incredulity, no wonder or astonishment. This is simply how the story goes. Marquez's use of this technique was so famous that many people only know Latin American culture through this lens, and this trial by fire of cultural experience is what won Marquez the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1982. In his stories, the fictional city of Macondo is brought to life, and many of the symbols of Latin America and its relating cultures become vivid and fascinatingly natural in its stark Spanish prose. Now, eating dirt has primarily been seen in 3 regions in the world: Latin America, the North American South, and Africa. There is an argument to be made that the 2 former locations inherited from the latter due to the Atlantic slave trade. But it's also true that Native American cultures have purportedly eaten clay for years before Columbus. Communities in the American South practice eating chalk to this day, despite it being relatively absent in almost every other section of the US. The truth is, we don't really know why people in real life eat soil. But that's not necessary to glean a meaning from its literary presence. To isolate that, we can look at its particular prevalence among women. There are 2 main groups that geophagia tends to influence among the cultures I mentioned: malnourished people in times of strife, and pregnant women. Literarily, one might even consider these things the same thing. Carrying a baby takes a lot of energy and nutrition. For a time, a pregnant person is feeding 2 people with the mouth of only one, and especially in earlier times or in places with low availability of healthy food, malnutrition is sadly common, both inside and outside of pregnancy. Because of this, eating earth has become, literarily, heavily connected with both women and unmet needs. Laura Esquivel, a Mexican writer who also used magical realism, employs a similar thing at the end of her novel Like Water for Chocolate, where her protagonist Tita eats candles. The character, whose lover dies while making love to her for the first time, is grief-stricken and attempts to ignite the spark of life she lost within her by eating the candles. Jeremy MacClancy argues that this also happens in The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. The symbol, though slight, is present and prevalent enough to be featured in multiple stories across cultures. So again, why does Rebecca eat earth in 100 Years of Solitude? Well, at first it might be to symbolize that she comes from a malnourished family. This is the logical basis for the custom. Perhaps her old family, which the Buendias do not recognize or remember, simply did not have enough food. But this facet of Rebecca's character becomes so much more over the course of the story. Eventually, this habit of geophagia is scolded and beaten out of her by the Buendias. But when she falls in love with a handsome salesman, Petracotes, only for him to leave, she again begins consuming earth in secret. Eventually he returns, only for her sister, who is also in love with Petra, to tell her that she will stop their marriage at all costs. This, again, recurs the habit. In fact, whenever Rebecca is put under inordinate amounts of stress, she starts to eat earth again. After even more delays to her marriage, her unrequited love starts to boil inside her. And this symbol, like many symbols throughout the novel, recur and recede all the way up to Rebecca's death. Rebecca lacked many things in her life: food and parents, but also acceptance, love. And Marquez masterfully used this visceral symptom as a way to communicate the character's feminine angst and frustrations to the reader. What is left is incredibly emblematic of what makes Cien Años de Soledad such an incredible novel, which is its ability to pack symbols into physically visceral things, into things that make us feel uncomfortable or unnatural. In the book, this history, the feminine, impoverished, slave-like elements of this habit, become combined. Instead of being isolated and cordoned off scientifically or independently, instead of being explained or followed through, they become solidified into an act, a literary symbol with almost unexplainable depth and implication. When Rebecca eats the mud around her house at night, we shouldn't limit ourselves to saying this symbol means one thing or the other. Instead, we should recognize the frustration, the pain, the anger at having things we need but are not given, the femininity of it all, and we should let those ideas swim together in their history and literary power. The very fact that such a simple, strange act we might not even think about can mean so much that we couldn't comprehend it any other way is an incredible example of what makes magical realism such a powerful way to write. These women, either real or imagined, needed something, and when they are let down by the societies around them, they desperately look for it from the greatest source of femininity there is: Mother Earth. Symbols have forever been a part of how we understand stories. The next time you find yourself writing about a character who feels misunderstood, uncared for, unloved, you might find yourself having them eat something they shouldn't. Might not be a lot: a salty stone on a beach, a piece of chalk, some shattered fragments of red clay. But with such a simple act, easily encapsulated by a single sentence, you can imbue your story, your characters, with centuries of meaning from all parts of the globe. And all of that literary power, that whirling gyre of ever-increasing symbolic history, is why Rebecca Buendía ate the earth.